32 ticks following. So they are swallowing. Monkey is swallowing. Snake self swallowing. Next, a swallow too will fly and come and swallow. You're ever swallow in a hollow gallows.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Alheri Egor-Egbe, and I work at Google in the Dublin office. I present to you today two other fantastic colleagues of mine, and we will be having a conversation about African identity, African art, and art interacting with technology in the 21st century. Without further ado, I will introduce Addy Awofisayo, who joins us from London, and Elijah Lawal, who joins us from London. Addy, let's go straight to you. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us in just a few sentences why you're excited to be here today on the Google Arcade panel?
Thanks. Thank you very much. My name is Addy. I look after our content partnerships for Sub-Saharan Africa, even though out of London, but I'm always literally in one African country or another. I'm very excited to be here. I actually attended the Arcade Festival last year, I think the one in Abeokuta. So such a bummer we can't meet physically, but that's, I think a lot of things have shown us that we can be together, even physically being afar. So very glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Addy. Thank you, Addy. Elijah.
Hi. Equally pleased to be part of this festival and equally sad that we can't all meet in person, but here's hoping that 2021 is kinder to us than 2020. So my name is Elijah. I'm on the comms team and I lead our ads and privacy regulation hot topics. So even though the team is based out of San Francisco, I'm currently in London. And yeah, just to echo Addy's views, very excited to be part of this and particularly talking about African identity, which is tremendously important to me. I'm also the author of a nonfiction book that came out last year called The Clapback, which seeks to debunk racial stereotypes about the Black community.
Thank you very much, Addy and Elijah. I'll kick it off. The first part of this, I would like for us to focus a little bit on African identities, right? So I'm starting with myself. I am originally from Nigeria. I was born and raised in Nigeria till I was 16. And then I went to A-levels in South Africa. And from South Africa, moved to the US. So my identity grew bigger from being Nigerian. Well, in Nigeria, you don't really think about, oh, I'm Nigerian. You just are, right? And then moving to South Africa, then I was in a Pan-African boarding school. So we had people from over 20 African countries. And your first identity then becomes, oh, that's Nigerian, she's Nigerian. And then moving to the US, my identity became Black African. And now I live in Europe. I'm based in Dublin. And my identity in very interesting ways is still very Black and African. So I'm thinking for myself now, I probably have had to morph and shift into each of these spheres or spaces that I've occupied. When I think about it personally, I wouldn't say it's really affected how I think about myself or how I present myself or how I interact with the world around me. But it probably has in more ways than I have even reckoned with or reconciled and recognized. Elijah, starting with you, how has your identity kind of morphed and moved across life and then climaxing to some extent with you writing The Clapback? Please walk us through that story.
Yes, so I think similar to you, a lot of what my perceived identity has always depended on the countries I'm in and the people I'm interacting with. So I was born in London, but I moved to Nigeria when I was 6, and I was there until I was 14. So during the periods of 6 to 14, I was just me. There was no need to describe myself as Nigerian because, as you correctly pointed out, everyone was Nigerian. but I suppose while I was in Nigeria, then, I really came into understanding my identity as a Yoruba man. So I learned to speak Yoruba, which is just amazing. I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do that. And then even within Yoruba culture, my family is from Ijebu. Well, my dad's side is from Ijebu and my mom's side is from Abeokuta. So, Ogun State really being a huge part of me, and really understanding that part of my heritage and culture was important. But like you said, as soon as I came back to the West, when I came back to London, I was just Black. There was no intersectionality of being Nigerian or being from Ogun State or being a Ijebu boy. So that was something that I really had to adjust to. And when I also lived in Dublin as well, like yourself, it was just like, I then had that dual identity of being Black, but also British. And anyone who understands the history of British colonialism in Ireland will understand the challenges that comes with that. So I guess to sort of sum it up, I'm constantly being defined by other people, which is fine. This is how human society works, and this is how we move through the world. But what's always been important to me is embracing all of those identities. Yes, I am Black, I am British, I am Nigerian, I'm Yoruba, I'm from Ogun State, I'm an Ijebu boy, I have a Bekuta blood in me. Like, I'm all of that. I imagine like a Russian doll where it's just like lots of identities. So to me, it's important to embrace all of that, but also I know who I am and I'm rooted in that as well.
Mm-hmm. Just staying on that a little bit, Elijah, how did all of those identities then come together with you writing a book, The Clapback, which it's very aptly named A Guide to Debunking Racial Stereotypes, right? So on one hand, as you mentioned, stereotyping and people labeling, it's part of how we make sense of the world as human beings. But where then have you in your work, both as a person navigating all these spaces and as a writer, drawn the line between, okay, this is who you say I am, this is who I am, and I will even go a step further to write a whole book about it?
Yeah, I think the opportunity of living in lots of different countries and being labeled lots of different things, it helped me kind of understand stereotypes a little bit more, because when I was in Nigeria, if I was really good at basketball, it's because I'm good at basketball. It's not because I'm Black, because everyone else is Black. But when you move to any of the countries in the West, being good at a certain thing is attributed to your being Black, or being bad at something is attributed to your being Black. And so I really wanted to take people on that journey of like understanding that absence of, in the racial context, absence of whiteness, Black people or people of color overall, they can just be, there's no, you can do this because of a certain color of your skin, because everyone else is there, right? So, and as you pointed out, like when I'm in Nigeria, I'm not like, hey, I'm Nigerian, because like pretty much everyone is, or at least most of the population is. So that's something I really wanted to bring into my work. But the second thing is, and for anyone who's read the book, they would have noticed this, like I bring in my culture, I bring in my history. When I talk about interracial dating, I talk also about my dad being from Ijebu and my mom being from Abeokuta, and those two sorts of tribes of people not traditionally getting on. I talk about having Nigerian cousins and like how Nigerians collect cousins like Pokemon, even though like they're not literally your birth cousins. So, this kind of humor that you will get if you're Nigerian or if you're from Ogun State, or actually, no, I think generally if you're just Black or if you're just African, you just kind of get a lot of these things. And I really wanted that to come through in the book, because I wanted Black people, and particularly Africans, reading it to feel some sense of connection with me, with my journey and our overall shared identity.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Elijah. Addy, let us circle back to you a little bit. Do you have a similar story to what kind of Elijah and I have touched upon, living in multiple countries, multiple cultures, and finding your identity within all of that?
Yes. And I think it's interesting because I feel like most Africans have that kind of story. So my story, I was born in the United States. I was born in Virginia. I grew up there till about 5, so I don't even remember what it was like growing up there at that young age, and then moved to Nigeria with my parents, who are Nigerians from Osun State, Yoruba. And that's what I remember growing up in Nigeria and kind of just being a true Nigerian child, being a true Yoruba girl. And like you, I moved back to the US, I guess, when I was 16. So this was after high school, secondary school in Nigeria. So moving for college. And that's when it started kind of dawning on me that I was African, I was Nigerian, I was Black. Because growing up in Nigeria, there was really none of that. Like, no one would ask you, oh, where are you from? You know, no one would say, oh, you have an accent or anything like that. So it was, you know, and maybe in Nigeria, what you would hear, where are your parents from? You know, if you meet like parents of your friends, they'll want to know where your parents are from. And if you're Yoruba or Igbo, but not necessarily about being Black. And moving to the States, you know, and I went to UVA, which is predominantly a white school. And when you get there, the first question is, where you from? And I would say Virginia, you know. And sometimes I would do it as a joke because I know what they really mean. And then it would be like, oh, that's interesting, but where are you really from? Like, what's the accent from? And I would say Nigeria, you know. And then I'll have to give this story about how I was born in Virginia, so I'm American, but I moved to Nigeria when I was young. So my formative years were in Nigeria, so I identify as Nigerian, you know, and then I have to give this little bit of a story. But yeah, I mean, I think I consider myself Nigerian first, really, because the culture and the values that have shaped me where, you know, when I was living in Nigeria and my parents bringing me up. And so I would consider myself, you know, Nigerian first and with a blue passport. So, you know, but I also still consider myself American because I love my blue passport and, you know, and I appreciate, you know, kind of having that dual experience of being Nigerian and being American. And it's interesting because now I have nieces and nephews who are born in America. And one of them has actually had the pleasure of coming to Nigeria also when she was about 5. No, actually, she was about 8. So she, you know, already had like a good experience of being American. And then she comes to Nigeria around that age and she's trying to find herself. Now she's back in America. I think her parents were like, let's go back. So now she's back, but she, you know, I think that she spent about 5 years, and those 5 years really formed, you know, helped form who she is. So she understands what it means to be Nigerian, what it means to be African, and she has that culture and those values with her, you know, and that I think is making her, you know, a better young woman, having that experience and being able to share that with her friends. In America, my other niece and nephew, they're super young. One is, I think, 5, one is about 7. So they don't yet have that, but it's really hard growing up in a Nigerian home, wherever you are in the world, and not having that Nigerian experience. Like, your parents would always instill that in you. And so even though they don't have the, you know, the pleasure of living in Nigeria and kind of knowing and experiencing what it truly means, we make sure they know. So yeah. That's my story.
Yeah. Thank you both for that. It's so interesting how I'm just thinking about from different parts of the world, different experiences and so on, but somehow all of these things are coming together. And it's when I think about it, it's such a blessing in disguise, you know, with lockdown and not being able to travel, because then we really are sitting and having this conversation all the way from outside the continent, but talking about how that has impacted, that being African in different countries and different continents, how that has impacted our identities as individuals, you know, as adult individuals living outside the African continent. I'm curious then, I suppose, how do you both kind of marry that this is who I am. I'm a cosmopolitan individual, with this background and with this culture. How does that live out in your day-to-day lives? How does that live out in your day-to-day lives, especially professionally? How are you able to bring certain aspects of your identity into your corporate job? And are there any aspects that you're kind of like, I'll keep this to myself, or I'll keep this for myself? How do you make that balance?
Elijah, you want to go? Or?
Thank you. As much as possible, I try and live it every day. And I try and just embrace the fact that my British identity and my Nigerian identity are just as much a part of me as anything else. And I want to make sure that I encapsulate that every day. So I'll give you a classic example. My first name is Elijah. My Yoruba name is Oluwatosin or Tosin. When I speak to my Nigerian family, they call me Tosin. And when I speak to everyone else, they call me Elijah. In my head, I never distinguish between the two. They're just me. I would answer to both of them without even thinking twice. When I'm speaking to my mom on the phone, we switch between English and Yoruba and Pidgin, right? Because it's just natural to the both of us. And so I try as much as possible to sort of bring that into my everyday life. And to your point about how we reconcile that with work, I try and bring others along with me on that journey. So I think it was last year for Nigerian Independence Day, I took my team to a Nigerian restaurant. There's this great restaurant in Peckham in London called 805. And I took my team there. We all had jollof, eba, efo.
Wow.
Yeah, and just the whole team just enjoyed it, and I used it as an opportunity to talk about my culture, but also to talk about some of the challenges that we face as, specifically Black people in England, and then specifically Africans, and then specifically Nigerians. So being able to just kind of bring that into your personal and professional life, I think is very important. And even though I don't live in Nigeria anymore, and I have fantastic colleagues who are based in Africa, I'm always kind of thinking with any product launch or any sort of messaging, I'm always thinking, okay, but how would that play in a different country? If this depends on having electricity on 24/7, then that may not play exactly well in certain parts of Africa. So it's kind of a juxtaposition. I try not to worry too much or think about it for myself because it's part of me, but I'm more thoughtful and proactive about bringing colleagues along on that journey.
Yeah, I really, really like that. Yeah, I identify with a lot of the things you've said. Addy, I'm curious to hear about how you bring that to work.
I think for me, I'm a little bit lucky because my role is actually looking after the African market, right? So my role is, how do I help creators? How do I help artists? How do I help our media partners in Africa utilize YouTube to achieve their objectives? And some of those objectives could be reaching a global audience. And so by virtue of that, every day I'm advocating for that. Every day I'm speaking to that at work. And sometimes it's a bit interesting because if I'm advocating for a certain thing and I'm like, oh, we need to get Nigeria on the list of X, initiative that we're doing as YouTube. Sometimes I'm actually like, am I advocating because I'm Nigerian or I'm African, or am I advocating because that's my job and I should advocate for my market and advocate for us to get certain resources and get certain things. So sometimes in my head, I'm always like, okay, make sure you take out the African in you and the Nigerian in you. And it actually plays a role because I look after the 3 markets, right? Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. And so it's like, don't just be like, oh, we need to do this in Nigeria. Like, think about Kenya, think about South Africa, because you also look after those markets. So yeah, I think for me, it's just, my role is kind of put me in the situation where I have to bring that to work anyways. I have to bring who I am. And I think it's also a plus, because when I'm talking about certain things in the market and talking about our creator landscape or our creative ecosystem, I'm talking about it as Addy, who leads that market and knows that market from a business point of view. But I also have this added value of Addy, who knows the culture, knows the country, knows the people. But the thing is, I always have to remind myself that the Nigeria experience is not the Kenyan experience. It's not the South Africa experience. So even me, I have to be like, okay, I cannot bring that and be like, oh yeah, in South Africa, this, because it's completely different. I've had to learn South Africa more. I've had to learn Kenya more, just because I don't have that personal experience. So I've had to, kind of take that feedback for myself of how do I learn that and then bring that, also to work. But yeah, I think I'm, I love my job because it gives me the opportunity to not only bring myself, but also bring, the personal learnings and experiences that I have to actually make me do my job better.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's really powerful. Both of you, Elijah and Addy, I think one common thing I find in listening to you both just on this specific question is, I always think about it as a circle, right? So there are certain circles where I'm in the circle. There are people outside the circle. So I have to stretch out my hand and pull them into my circle. There are certain times then where other people have other circles around them and they have to stretch out and pull me into the circle, right? But I'm just really fascinated with how you're both so thoughtful about inclusion, about making sure that you share your culture with people and you bring people into those, circles with you. I'm going to not really switch gears, but maybe that metaphor is on my mind because I'm finally learning to drive at my big age, as Nigerians say, at my big age. But I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And we started to touch upon this, but thinking about this professionally, Elijah, behind you, we can see a lot of books, and I can guess those are not all the books you have, right? I'm pretty sure there are many more books you have or you've read or you've interacted with. And the irony is not lost on me that this is Ake Book and Arts Festival, right? How in your work, and then for you, Addy, thinking about the fact that you are leading content partnerships for Africa, seated in London, and as you've mentioned, a lot of your work revolves around being an unofficial advocate, official, unofficial advocate, depending on what hat you have to wear that day. I'm thinking now about what are some of the trends for you, Addy, specifically that you're seeing on YouTube from the African continent that are making you super excited. And then for you, Elijah, on a literary side, what are some of the things that you're seeing? African literature, African, whatever it is, however you choose to answer that question. But professionally and personally, what are some of the trends or the things that are exciting you both from a YouTube side and from a literary side? Addy, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's both our music and our movies. Right? Our music, like on YouTube and even off YouTube, has just exploded, right? So and the amazing thing is YouTube as given artists, both old, new, emerging, an opportunity to reach an audience outside of their market, right? Before, back in the days, for you to know if your song gets blown is because you were getting airplay on radio. Now it's really, radio is important because then you reach, you can reach an audience that may not be online, especially in the case of Africa, where not everyone is online yet and has access to the internet. But YouTube has provided them with access beyond their borders, right? Beyond the borders of Johannesburg or Lagos or Port Harcourt, right? And that has also helped them gain more fans, like globally. I was talking to an artist who talked about how when they're figuring out where to go on tour, they go to their YouTube analytics and look at where their views are coming from. And they're like, oh, our views are coming in France. We have 30% of views coming from France. We're going to tour in France.
That's so amazing.
That means they have an audience in France, right? Like, that means there are people listening to their songs in France. And so I think for me personally and professionally, I get very excited about our music. And when I see how far and wide our African artists have gone, and also when they start getting global accolades, I'm just always excited and always proud also. And then movies, movies is also, we have a huge diaspora audience outside of the continent. And a lot of those people want to connect back to what's happening at home. And YouTube is one of those ways. Like, personally, my sister, whenever I go to her home in Virginia, she's always on YouTube watching a Nollywood movie. Like, sometimes I'm like, can we watch something else? Like, I live and breathe this because these are my partners, like, on a professional base. But personally, like, I'm just like, can we watch something else? But she's like, the latest and greatest of, like, Nollywood movie on YouTube. She and my mom, like, that's all they would watch. I have to, like, go into another room to try and watch something else because I'm like, I need a little bit of a break. So our music and our movies, I think have gone far and wide. And I think, for me, I'm happy and that YouTube has played a role in that. But even outside of YouTube, it's so amazing to see, even our actors and actresses and the movies that are getting on, SVOD platforms and things like that. It's just amazing to see.
That's wonderful. That's so wonderful. And I laugh because in my mind, I'm like, that's all of us, watching Hollywood movies. Elijah, I'm curious to hear your experience around that.
No, I will echo everything like Addy said. It's so beautiful to see, like, the music that we grew up with, or the extension of the music that we grew up with, being that has just blown up around the world. And actually, it's a little bit of a shame that it took this long, because I think we kind of went from, King Sunny Ade, Fela at the start, which kind of broke up, like Fela and Femi Kuti, who blew up in the West, and then there was a huge gap before, like, now we're starting to see a lot of African artists kind of blow up in terms of, like, Afro beats, and there was just a huge gap. And unfortunately, that was like my prime years. This was like when I was growing up, and so I had this weird gap in between where I was kind of missing out on a lot of the culture and a lot of the music being based in London. So it's really great to see. And then, from the literary point of view, I grew up reading Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, The Gods Are Not to Blame by Ola Rotimi. And, these were just amazing books. And again, I kind of lost a little bit of reading books from Africans or about African cultures and Nigerians specifically. And so it's only recently that I'm starting to get back into it. My friend and colleague Mish recommended a fantastic book called The Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wives.
You don't say.
I love that. I love that book. It's such a great book, and it's just kind of revitalized my interest. And so I am hoping that African literature can blow up the same way music and film has. And so, yeah, and, as a writer myself, this is something that I'm, like, personally invested in. So I really wish that there are huge opportunities now for writers to blow up in the West. Or actually, maybe not. Maybe they're just happy blowing up in Africa and just, like, being and just, like, enjoying in that success. I don't think one has to blow up in the West in order to be successful. But from a purely selfish perspective and being based here, I would love to see that kind of widespread success.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just I was so taken by what you said just now. Like, writers don't have to blow up in the West to be defined, you know, wherever you want to. But of course, for us now, I think then the good of all of this is we can access a lot of this content from abroad, you know. And even now we're speaking at a festival from our homes, wherever we are. And a lot of the panelists, a lot of the speakers are also going to be joining from outside the continent. And how powerful to see, you know, technology just bring us all together in such a wonderful way. I want to ask a bit of a technical question now, Addy. How have you I think one thing that swirls around in a lot of people's minds is copyright. How have you seen kind of the copyright landscape shift to not only incorporate, maybe we have certain nuances or certain cultural differences or certain things we do a bit differently on the African continent. How have you seen those shift policy or shift the way you even think about copyright in your work and for YouTube content partnerships for the continent?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I'll caveat that I'm not a lawyer. So anyone that needs advice on copyright, go to a lawyer. Don't take my word for it. But what we've seen, especially in the movie space, because of how, you know, right now, a lot of our producers are, you know, they're churning out movie content, and movies are usually sold. So for example, person A produces a movie, wants to get it out to as many people as possible. They sell it to different distributors. So they can sell it to person B, sell the rights to the movie to person B, C, and D. And then they might sell, you know, exclusive rights, but then they might sell exclusive rights to person B, C, and D. But those exclusive rights may not include digital, right? It may just be exclusive to pay TV or exclusive to free to air or exclusive for a period of time. And so you see a lot of people, because digital is starting to become a big part of the distribution for movie producers. We're seeing a lot of them starting to add digital to, you know, to their agreements, because I take that movie, I have the rights, even though I have the rights maybe for pay TV, but there's nothing that says I cannot use it on YouTube, right? I cannot put it online for digital. And so I put it up, and then I'm the owner of the movie, and I see my movie online, and I'm like, no, I didn't give you the rights to do that. So I think there's a lot of education that's still happening on the continent in that space about just the different platforms, the different rights that you get for different distribution platforms. And for YouTube to kind of help with that space, we have something called Content ID. So if you're a producer that has a lot of, like, a huge catalog to a lot of movies, you get access to this tool that allows you basically match if someone uploads, you know, a certain movie, a certain visual, a certain audio, especially for artists, Content ID can help, you know, flag. And if you, maybe the person didn't have the rights, you can either decide to take it down, or you can monetize it, or you can just track it. Because UGC also helps a lot, user-generated content. So when users are putting up maybe a snippet of, you know, a song or something, that doesn't always mean that, you know, the owner of that song would want to take it down. It just means it's contributing to their ecosystem, and it's contributing to making their song popular. So they might just track it. But yeah, I think, you know, whenever anyone is thinking about content and thinking about protecting their assets, always make sure you just, like, talk to a lawyer.
You know, I find that really good, because I remember growing up in Nigeria, and oh my goodness, I probably read so many pirated books without knowing. But that's just because even my parents probably had no idea about just how bad piracy was. And you would go into the streets and see people selling books by the roadside, and those are the books my mom would buy for me. So I grew up reading mostly Nigerian books. So I don't think I had ever read a non-Nigerian book until I maybe was in secondary school taking literature. And I read, like, Lord of the Flies and some Shakespeare. And that was when I was like, okay, that's cool. But my first African literature, which is so different from a lot of my friends or my peers who grew up reading predominantly non-African books and then were exposed back to their own like African, literature. And I find it so interesting, but it's a blessing because my parents were fully educated in Nigeria. So truly all they knew were these Nigerian authors. So Elijah, same as you, I read The Secret Lives of Baba Shagi's Wives. I believe I was a teenager and the book had just come out. I have no idea how I got my hands on it, but I just read it. And thinking back now, I wonder what I thought about this man who has 4 wives, and how the book deals with certain things that my teenage mind probably just read. I was like, okay, that's cool. But I would definitely interact with so differently now, being an adult and understanding the place of that work of fiction in the wider literary world and in the world today. So, Addy, am I right to say that in many ways YouTube is kind of solving these piracy concerns, or at least helping to move forward the piracy challenges, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and especially online, but that doesn't solve for offline, right? So especially now, I think in a market like Nigeria or, even some other parts of Africa, offline piracy is really where I think the issue is. So someone releases a new album, the next thing you're seeing DVDs sold on the streets. You're seeing a copy of the CD being sold on the streets, and whether that's the real one or not, you don't know. Same goes for movies, right? You take a movie, you burn it, you put it on a DVD, you sell it. So a lot of offline piracy is still going on, and I think that's where our legal landscape comes into play. It's how do we put more pressure to help like minimize like the piracy that happens, especially offline.
That's good. I hopefully then as we solve online, then that in some way, would help offline. Elijah, for you, I have 2 questions. There's an A part, which is I'm just thinking about it, like how did you manage the writing of a whole book with your 9 to 5? And then B part, are you thinking of fiction in the future? Anything under your sleeves?
I'll answer the B part first. I am thinking of fiction. When you're talking about the Secret Lives, and saying like you found it, if you like when you read it as a kid, you found it like very strange that a man had 4 wives. It
wasn't strange, I saw it, but I just thought, I see that in Super Story anyway. So I never thought about it like with my now in my 20s mind. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. But then I was like, okay, maybe just Super Story or another,
No, I get that. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents are Muslim, and in Islam, you're allowed to have up to 4 wives. So, my grandfather has multiple wives, and so I kind of grew up with that not even being like a thing for me. So when I first read it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like this is the thing. But in my fiction, in terms of what I'm thinking about next, is also I want to shine a light on my culture, on Nigerian culture. So I want in my characters and in the way they act and the way they behave, the Nigerianness to come out and just kind of be natural. I don't want to have to be like Captain Exposition and be like, this person is Nigerian and so he does Nigerian things or she does Nigerian things. I just want, by the way they live their life and the way they talk, I speak with an English accent, but every once in a while, if I'm speaking to someone, I'll just say like, oh, I beg, give me the thing, like that's something that's just natural to me. Or I will end my sentences, especially when I'm speaking to my friend Mish, I'll end my sentences with Sha. It's like Sha. Or like if we want to tease each other, we'll just be like, look at your life. Which is exactly like you get it. And so, I don't have to explain that, oh, this doesn't mean let's take a look at your life as a whole. So yes, thinking about fiction. Yeah, look at your life, see your life. So yeah, I'm thinking about fiction. and I'm thinking about how I can bring my authentic Nigerianness into it. For the first part of the question, how I managed to write this book, whilst also a very demanding job, this is just my personal view, but I think like as an adult, because of everything that we've got going on, you can be great at only 2 things at a time. 3 if you're really, really good. I think just at any point in time, you can just be really good at only 2 things. Which is why, like, for instance, my friends who are married and have kids, they're like, oh man, like I'm not spending enough time with my partner. And I'm like, yeah, but you have a job and you have a kid. So focus on those 2 things. When the kid's in daycare, then you can also like pay particular attention. Sometimes you just have to let things just float so you can focus on 2 things. And so for me, it was a huge sacrifice to just ignore everything else. And the only 2 things that I focused on were my job and this book. You know, my friendships, I just had to put them on cruise control. My relationship, my health, like going to the gym, all of those things. No, gym, not really. Swimming pool. I just had to put those on cruise control. And while I focused on those 2 things, it was a huge sacrifice, but it was worth it in the end, which is great. But it's not a sacrifice that one should take lightly.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Addy and Elijah. This has been fun. It's been a lot of fun. I just went into like, okay, let's see how it goes, but it's been so much fun. I've learned a lot. And for everyone watching, I'm pretty sure you've also learned a lot. It's been an absolute honor for us from Google to have this opportunity to just share, you know, our lives, a bit about our work with all of you at Ake, and we wish you a fantastic festival. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we see you soon, very soon, next year. Thank you. That's all from us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Sticky, spicy, sweet.
Don't touch me! I will get you arrested!
Very, very easy.
Relax, everybody!
He shot you!
That 5 minutes madness only you can understand. Visit myspectre.com to get your Spectre experience. Spectre, loans in 5 minutes.
Stranger's Guide is not a typical American travel magazine. Our mission is to dive deep into a single location, commissioning work from great writers and photographers, famous individuals, as well as up-and-coming new voices. This year, we decided to go to Lagos. And we are proud of the volume we produced. with original work from some of Nigeria's best writers and photographers, working with luminaries like Wale Soyinka, Molara Wood, and Femi Kute. We think this is a very special volume, and we're so excited to bring it back to Lagos.
I was very excited when I got the call because it's a new frontier. Every chance to create is beautiful, and so to have the opportunity to create a theme song for something I actually care about, it's a perfect combination.
If you ever need a new place to go, you can join me in a world of words.
First, create a melody. Melodies are usually what make songs, as they say, sweet, and so that is where I started from. I tried to find something that merged the folk sound I'm used to, but also sprinkle a bit of the African spirit in there.
When it seems like I'm nowhere to be found, if you look, you'll find me in a book.
With the lyrics for the songs, a lot of times when I was younger, when you didn't find me anywhere, I was very likely in my room reading a book.
Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon.
Reading is a big part of my person, and I'm also a writer, so it all just comes together. The best thing about reading, and what's really important about it, is that it helps us become who we should be. With reading, we become many things. We become empathetic to people. Stories that are not ours, we get to experience, and I feel like that is one thing that makes you a well-rounded human being.
You'll never be alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the world in a book.
It's extremely important to read the work of other African writers that are not Nigerian or from my nationality, because it's a beautiful mix of finding home and visiting a new place, all in one.
Never be alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the world in a book.
One Read is an app I will use.
We don't just think of ourselves as a bank. We think of ourselves as corporate citizens with responsibility for growing the economy. Reading and education is a key part of it. But equally important is having access to reading materials at home. A lot of the intervention we've done throughout this COVID is to ensure that people can safely navigate the uncertainties of the COVID crisis and come out of it ready for, to live again.
Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon.
The dreams that we have are limited by what we have directly interacted with. What reading does is it makes it possible for you to begin to live in worlds that don't yet exist. One Read creates a discipline of reading. One Read puts me on a timeline. It gives me an important book and I have an opportunity to read it and to collaborate. It's almost like having someone who does your book selection for you. If you have editors and people who are really good at this saying to you, this is the book for the month, I value that. I want to be able to read in a community. I want reading to be a collaborative thing. I want reading to be a communing, and One Read allows me to do that. I will use One Read any day, anytime.
Don't ruin your special moment. Shop now. Altmod.